What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats of every one of the weapons in Modern Warfare, and in today's episode we're finally going to be covering the last sniper rifle, and this is the HDR. So hopping right into it, our damage profile is identical to the damage profile of the AX50, and this means in the closer range situations, this gun will be a one-shot kill everywhere except the limbs. So stomach, chest, shoulders, as well as head, all of that will be a one-shot kill up close. However, when you really start stretching the ranges out, which we'll have a look at the ranges in a little bit, then you can no longer get a one-shot kill to the lower torso. It's only going to be upper torso, shoulders, and head. Speaking of headshots, obviously in regular multiplayer, it is always going to be a one-shot kill to the head because we got a great headshot multiplier. However, in Warzone, we have an even better headshot multiplier, and as far as I can tell at least, it's always just going to deal a flat 250 damage to the head, no matter what the range is. And what this means is it will always be a one-shot kill to the head, even if the enemy has full armor, unless you're shooting through something, and that can be anything. Even a pane of glass will reduce the damage enough to where you won't get a one-shot kill to the head on a fully armored enemy. As for the rate of fire, this is the slowest in the sniper rifle category, and just a little bit slower than the AX50 at 42 rounds per minute, and this means it takes just over 1.4 seconds between each shot. So our time to kill, assuming it's going to take you a second shot to kill, is ridiculously slow. As for ranges though, this is where the HDR really excels. The drop-off point on the range for this is 100 meters, which in regular multiplayer like 6v6 and 10v10 maps, I don't know of a single line of sight that could be used practically where you can extend beyond this 100 meters. In ground war and Warzone, of course, you can be shooting people well over 100 meters though. But this is the best range within the sniper rifle category and actually in the entire game out of any of the guns. As for suppressors, the lightweight suppressor will reduce this by 25%, and the monolithic suppressor has a really strange increase of 11%. This takes us into hipfire, which is standard for the sniper rifle category and not great at all, so you definitely want to avoid hipfiring whenever possible. And next I want to have a look at the idle sway, which again, this is pretty standard for the sniper rifle category. If you're not holding your breath, it will be swaying around a decent amount on your target. When it comes to recoil, as you can see here, there is definitely some recoil that's upwards and a little bit to the right, and this gun doesn't recenter between shots without any attachments on it, unlike the other sniper rifles that have a little bit of recentering involved. So you do have to manually recenter, and that's something to be aware of while using this gun. Additionally, if you are using this at really long ranges, you can often lose your target just due to this recoil, and that's one downside compared to something like the AX50 for instance. Now, getting into our handling, our aim down sight time is identical to the AX50 at 617 milliseconds. And our sprint out time isn't really relevant with this gun because you shouldn't be hip firing it, and it only applies while hip firing anyways with this. This is 284 milliseconds for our standard sprint out time and 400 milliseconds for our tactical sprint out time. After that, I want to look at our magazine capacity, which is 5 rounds with 10 in reserve, which is the same as the AX50. However, our reload add time is the slowest in the sniper rifle category at 2.72 seconds. Now, if you did want to speed that up, we could use the sleight of hand weapon perk, and with this one, it will cut it all the way down to 1.97 seconds, which is much more respectable, but still not insanely fast by any means. As for the next important stat with sniper rifles, this is the amount of time it takes you to swap to a pistol, and I just used the X16 across all of my tests here. And surprisingly, the HDR is noticeably faster than the Dragunov in this area, but it is just 1 frame slower than the AX50 at 60 frames per second. Now, getting into our movement speed, this is 87%, which is the slowest in the sniper rifle category, and our aim down sight straight speed is obviously extremely slow at 23%. As for our bullet drop, this is an extremely important stat when you're looking at ground war or Warzone, where you're really stretching that range out, and you tend to have to account for bullet drop. As you can see here, our base bullet drop isn't so bad at all. This is at 100 meters. You basically just have to put that reticle on the enemy character like a hat, and you'll be hitting them in the head. Whereas with the 26.9 inch barrel, this is a very special barrel with this gun, which we'll look at in a little bit. With this one, this gun is basically hit scan. As far as I can tell, based on all of my testing, you just put the reticle exactly where you want to hit, and it will hit there. And that goes for much longer ranges as well. It's not just at 100 meters, even at 200, 300 meters, it still seems to be the same story. Now for the next one, the 26-inch bull barrel, this one does have actually a little bit more bullet drop than the base bullet drop, so you do have to account for that a bit more. And same thing goes with the 17-inch barrel. This is pretty much the same as the 26-inch barrel in this area. You definitely have to account for a little bit of bullet drop. So that pretty much wraps it up for the base stats of the HDR, but now let's move into the attachments, and the first one we're going to look at is that 26.9-inch barrel, which like I said is very special with this gun because it effectively turns it into hit scan. This means you don't really have to account for bullet drop, and you don't really have to lead your target even if they're moving at really long ranges. You just put the reticle on and pull the trigger. On top of this, we get a 36% increase to our damage range, which is really nice. And we get slightly improved recoil control as well, which if we have a look at it right here, you can see that there is still that similar sort of recoil where it kicks upwards and a little bit to the right, and it doesn't recenter itself. So you do still have to be aware of the recoil and you have to correct for it manually, but it definitely helps a little bit in this area. As for the downsides, our aim down sight speed is slowed down by 5 frames at 60 FPS, so all the way down to 701 milliseconds, which is quite slow. And on top of that, our overall movement speed is reduced by 4%, which is a pretty big reduction. Having said that though, the benefits you gain from this barrel, especially when we're looking at extremely long ranges, I would say they do outweigh these cons. In 6v6 or 10v10 though, I wouldn't say it's necessarily worth using this barrel because it really excels beyond 100 meters. As for the next barrel though, this is the 26-inch bull barrel, and with this one, the only pro is improved recoil control, which when you look at that doesn't seem like it would be much. But when we look at the actual recoil control improvement here, you can see this gun barely kicks at all with this barrel, and it does recenter itself pretty nicely as well, so you won't lose your target in your sights. However, for that one positive, this does come with quite a few downsides. The first one is a 25% loss to our range, which is definitely a pretty big loss to our range. And on top of that, we get an insane reduction to our aim down sight speed, is 767 milliseconds, which is the biggest reduction to aim down sight speed I've seen with any single attachment in the entire game. To top all of that off, our overall movement speed is reduced by 7%, which again, that is a massive reduction to our movement speed. And as a result, I would say this attachment is probably the worst attachment in the entire game. Yes, it's got a nice little upside, which can help in a couple situations, but it's not even close to being worth those downsides. This just leaves us with one last barrel, and that's the 17.2-inch bull barrel, and with this one, we have all the same pros and cons, but just to different extents. And let's start with the recoil control. As you can see here, once again, it helps a lot with your recoil control. Not quite as much as the previous one, but still, this is a very significant improvement. However, once again, we've got a bunch of downsides to this. The first one is our damage range is reduced by 12.5%, so still kind of sucks, but it's not nearly as bad as that 26-inch bull barrel. Then our aim down sight speed is reduced by 4 frames at 60 FPS down to 684 milliseconds, which still kind of sucks, but it's once again not as bad as the previous one. And then finally, our overall movement speed is reduced by 4%. Again, I just don't really see these downsides being worth that one positive, but if you really insist on having this significantly better recoil control, this at least would be a slightly better option than the 26-inch bull barrel. So that's it for the barrels, but we've got a couple other unique attachments, and these are the magazine attachments. With the 7-round extended mag, this one states that it reduces our aim down sight speed, but there's actually no visible change at all at 60 FPS. However, our overall movement speed is reduced by just 1.5%, which isn't so bad. Now, if you wanted to go a bit bigger than that, we could go with the 9-round extended mag, and with this one, there is a noticeable reduction to our aim down sight speed. It actually increases our aim down sight time by 2 frames at 60 FPS. And on top of that, our movement speed is reduced by 3%. And with that, this finally just leaves us with the attachments that impact our aim down sight time. I wanted to go through all of these just because aim down sight time is so important for sniper rifles. And the first image here shows all of the non-optical attachments and their impact. And a really important thing to point out here is there are only 2 attachments that actually help with your aim down sight speed with the HDR. And that's a big difference compared to the AX50, which has several attachments that can help in this area. So even though they have the same base aim down sight time, the AX50 has way more potential to have a faster aim down sight time than the HDR. Next up though, I want to show the aim down sight time with the optics, and I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but there is one really important one to point out here, and this is the Merc thermal optic. With this optic, it states in the description that this will help with your aim down sight speed, but it turns out it's actually the opposite. It will slightly slow down your aim down sight speed. So just be aware of that with that particular optic. But with that finally wraps it up for all of the important stats with the HDR, but now I just wanted to share a couple different attachment setups that I tend to use with this particular gun. And the first one is one that I tend to like using within ground war. With this one, we've got the 26.9 HDR Pro barrel. This one basically turns this into a hit scan, which is one of the biggest benefits of using the HDR. Then I've also got this stacked up with aim down sight attachments. So we've got the TAC laser as well as that F-TAC Hunter Scout stock. These both help with our aim down sight time a decent amount. After that, we've got the focus weapon perk, which especially for those closer range encounters really helps if somebody gets a shot on you as you're aiming down sight at them. It just makes sure that you don't flinch too much so you can often still stay on target and hit your shots. And then finally, just a 7-round extended mag here. You could definitely use this attachment setup within Warzone as well. However, what most people tend to lean towards within Warzone while using an HDR is a suppressed thermal build, because in Warzone, we've got a proper Call of Duty minimap where you show up if you shoot a non-suppressed weapon on that minimap. So suppressor is really nice, and the monolithic suppressor actually helps with your ranges a little bit. Once again, we've of course got that 26.9-inch Pro barrel. However, the big difference on this one is we've got that thermal sniper scope. Now, since we have all of these attachments so far, these really slow down your aim down sight time, and therefore I went for the attachment that helps the most with aim down sight time, and this is the TAC laser. So that will at least kind of compensate for the slowdown on your aim down sight speed with these other attachments. And then finally, that just leaves us with the 7-round extended mag. I really don't like reloading this thing too often because it has such a slow reload time, and also this gives you more total starting ammo. But with that, that finally wraps it up for today's gun guide on the HDR. As for my opinion on this sniper rifle, I just don't like the feel of it. For whatever reason, I always prefer the AX50. It just feels better in my hands. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you can stack up on more aim down sight time attachments. But another thing is I think I've really gotten used to leading targets and accounting for a bit of bullet drop. And with the HDR, if you're using the barrel that you should be using most of the time, the 26.9-inch Pro barrel, you don't have to account for bullet drop at all, and it just throws me off every time I do that within this game. But of course, that's just my opinion. I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about the HDR in Modern Warfare? Also, if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes of Gun Guides, I've now covered every gun in the game aside from shotguns, which we will be finally getting into next. I will leave a link to the playlist down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.